Paul Heyman just pulled back the curtain on the most shocking conspiracy in WWE history, and what he revealed about why Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed betrayed Seth Rollins is going to make you question everything you thought you knew about loyalty, manipulation, and who really controls WWE behind the scenes. This isn't about jealousy. This isn't about opportunity. This isn't about young lions trying to make names for themselves by taking down an established star. What Paul Heyman exposed in his exclusive interview that dropped just hours ago is so much deeper, so much more calculated, and so much more sinister than anyone predicted. And when I tell you who orchestrated this betrayal, when I reveal the real master manipulator pulling the strings, and when I explain the ultimate endgame that makes Seth Rollins just the first victim in a plan that threatens the entire WWE locker room, you're going to lose your mind. Let me start with what Paul Heyman actually said, word for word, because the way he delivered this information was masterful and terrifying. Heyman sat down with WWE's digital media team in what was supposed to be a standard interview about the current state of Monday Night Raw. But approximately 12 minutes into the interview, when asked about the shocking attack where Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed destroyed Seth Rollins and left him laying in the middle of the ring, Heyman's entire demeanor changed. He leaned forward, lowered his voice to that conspiratorial tone he's famous for, and said, "You want to know why Bron and Bronson turned on Seth? Because someone with far more power and far more patience than any of you realize has been planning this for months. Someone who understands that to control WWE's future, you don't just beat the current stars, you recruit the next generation and turn them into your weapons." The interviewer, clearly not expecting this kind of response, asked Heyman directly who he was talking about. And Heyman, with that knowing smile that makes you simultaneously trust and fear him, delivered the bombshell that has the entire wrestling world in absolute chaos right now. He said Roman Reigns didn't just lose the championship and disappear. He's been building an army. And Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed are just the first soldiers to reveal themselves. Seth Rollins thought he was safe because Roman wasn't on television. Seth thought the bloodline drama was over. Seth thought he could be the locker room leader and the face of Monday Night Raw without consequence. He was wrong. And by the time he realizes how wrong he was, it will be far too late. Let that sink in for a moment. Paul Heyman, Roman Reigns' longtime advocate and wiseman, is claiming that Roman has been secretly recruiting talent during his absence from WWE television. That Bron Breakker, one of the most promising young stars in the company and a second-generation wrestler with an incredible future ahead of him, has aligned himself with Roman Reigns. That Bronson Reed, a powerhouse who has been steadily climbing the card with dominant performances, is also part of Roman's plan. And that their vicious attack on Seth Rollins, which put Seth on the shelf with legitimate injuries, was just the opening salvo in Roman's campaign to reclaim control of WWE not through traditional means but by building a new faction that makes the original bloodline look tame by comparison. But here's where this gets even more insane and where Paul Heyman's revelation becomes truly frightening. Heyman didn't just confirm that Bron and Bronson are working with Roman. He suggested there are more recruits who haven't revealed themselves yet. He said, and I quote, "What you saw with Bron and Bronson was the announcement. The declaration of intent. But Roman Reigns doesn't show all his cards at once. There are others. Wrestlers you trust. Wrestlers you think are allies of people like Seth Rollins and Cody Rhodes. And when they reveal themselves, when Roman's full army stands together for the first time, the entire power structure of WWE will shift overnight." Think about the implications of what Heyman is saying. If he's telling the truth, and Heyman has proven over decades that when he reveals information this explosive it's usually based in reality, then WWE has a massive faction forming in the shadows. A faction led by Roman Reigns, the most dominant champion in modern WWE history. A faction that includes Bron Breakker, who many people believe will be WWE champion within the next 2 years. A faction that includes Bronson Reed, who has been on an absolute tear and looks like an unstoppable monster. And a faction that potentially includes other undisclosed members who are currently operating undercover, maintaining their public personas while secretly reporting to Roman and waiting for orders to strike. This isn't just a storyline angle. This is WWE potentially restructuring their entire landscape around Roman Reigns as the central figure of power even when he's not actively competing for championships. This is Roman evolving from tribal chief, a role focused on family and bloodline legacy, to something much bigger and more dangerous. A role where he's not just leading his relatives but recruiting the best and most dangerous talent in WWE regardless of their background, creating a mercenary army loyal only to him and willing to take out anyone who stands in the way of his dominance. Let me take you back to the attack itself because understanding what happened to Seth Rollins is crucial to understanding why this betrayal is so devastating and so effective. 3 weeks ago on Monday Night Raw, Seth Rollins was cutting a promo about being the workhorse of WWE, about showing up every single week regardless of injuries or setbacks, about being the locker room leader who younger talent could look up to and learn from. It was a classic babyface promo from Seth, positioning himself as the veteran who had been through everything and was still standing strong. Then Bron Breakker's music hit. The crowd erupted because everyone loves watching Bron work. He came to the ring with intensity and purpose, and for a moment it seemed like this might be a respectful confrontation. Maybe Bron was coming out to challenge Seth to a match. Maybe he was going to ask Seth for advice or mentorship. But the second Bron slid into the ring, his body language told a different story. He wasn't there to talk. He wasn't there to shake hands. He was there to send a message. Bron immediately got in Seth's face, backing him into the corner with aggressive energy. Seth, being Seth, didn't back down. He stood his ground and started jawing back, telling Bron that if he wanted to make a name for himself, there were proper ways to do it. That's when Bronson Reed's music hit. And the moment Reed appeared on the stage, you could see Seth's expression change. He realized this wasn't a spontaneous confrontation. This was planned. This was coordinated. This was a trap. Bronson Reed walked to the ring slowly, methodically, his massive frame blocking the entrance ramp and cutting off Seth's escape route. Seth was surrounded. Bron in front of him in the ring. Bronson approaching from behind. No allies coming to help because this was happening so fast that nobody had time to react. And then it began. Bron hit Seth with a clothesline that turned him inside out. Before Seth could get up, Bronson entered the ring and delivered a running splash that must have crushed Seth's ribs. Then they started taking turns. Bron with a Frankensteiner. Bronson with a powerbomb. Bron with another spear. Bronson with a second tsunami splash from the top rope. By the time WWE officials and other wrestlers flooded the ring to stop the assault, Seth Rollins was completely unconscious. The medical team had to stabilize him in the ring before they could even move him. He was stretchered out of the arena, taken to a local hospital, and diagnosed with 3 cracked ribs, a severe concussion, and a separated shoulder. Seth has been out of action since that attack, and there's no clear timeline for his return. Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed didn't just beat Seth up. They systematically dismantled him with the clear intent of removing him from WWE television for as long as possible. Now, with Paul Heyman's revelation, we understand why the attack was so brutal and so thorough. This wasn't about earning respect or proving toughness. This was Roman Reigns ordering a hit on Seth Rollins. This was Roman using Bron and Bronson as his enforcers to take out one of the biggest threats to his eventual return and reclamation of power. Seth Rollins has main event WrestleMania. Seth has beaten Roman before. Seth has the credibility and the locker room support to rally WWE against Roman when he comes back. So Roman made sure Seth wouldn't be around to organize any resistance. Paul Heyman elaborated on the relationship between Roman and these recruits in a way that's both fascinating and disturbing. According to Heyman, Roman didn't just offer Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed money or championship opportunities. Roman offered them something much more valuable in the wrestling business: legacy. Roman told them that aligning with him would guarantee their places in history. That being part of Roman's vision for WWE would elevate them beyond what they could achieve on their own. That their names would be spoken in the same breath as Roman Reigns for decades to come, not as his subordinates but as his partners in reshaping the entire industry. Heyman specifically addressed why Bron Breakker would agree to this alliance, and his explanation makes disturbing sense. Bron is a second-generation star, the son of Rick Steiner and the nephew of Scott Steiner. He grew up in this business. He understands that talent alone doesn't guarantee success in WWE. You need political protection. You need someone with power advocating for you backstage. You need an alliance that ensures you get opportunities and that you're protected from being buried by bad booking or jealous veterans. Roman Reigns, even without the championship, has more political power in WWE than almost anyone. An alliance with Roman means Bron's push is protected. His main event future is secured. And he doesn't have to wait years proving himself when he can skip the line by being part of Roman's inner circle. For Bronson Reed, the motivation is slightly different but equally compelling according to Heyman's breakdown. Reed has been wrestling for years, paying his dues in the independent scene, in NXT, getting released from WWE once and having to fight his way back. He's finally getting his moment, finally being pushed as a monster heel, finally getting the showcase he deserves. But Reed is also smart enough to know that WWE is littered with the corpses of promising pushes that fizzled out when creative lost interest or when someone backstage decided to go in a different direction. Aligning with Roman Reigns ensures that doesn't happen. Roman's influence means Reed's monster push continues. It means Reed gets meaningful feuds with top stars. It means Reed has job security and upward mobility that he couldn't guarantee on his own. But Heyman also revealed something darker about how Roman recruited these wrestlers. According to Heyman, Roman didn't just make offers. He made threats. He told Bron Breakker, "You can be with me and be a made man for life, or you can bet on yourself and hope WWE doesn't destroy your career the way they've destroyed so many others before you." He told Bronson Reed, "I rebuilt my body and my career after WWE gave up on you once. They'll do it again the second you stop being useful to them. But if you're with me, I'll make sure that never happens." Roman used fear as much as ambition to bring these recruits into his faction. Fear that WWE is an unstable, unreliable place for wrestlers who don't have powerful protection. Now let's address the elephant in the room. Where does the bloodline fit into this new faction Roman is building? Paul Heyman was asked directly whether this means Roman is abandoning the bloodline concept, whether he's moving away from family and heritage to build something based purely on power and dominance. Heyman's response was chilling. He said the bloodline was Roman's foundation. It proved he could lead, could dominate, could create something that main event WrestleMania multiple years in a row. But family is limiting. Family has obligations. Family can turn on you, as Roman learned. This new faction isn't bound by blood. It's bound by mutual benefit and absolute loyalty enforced through fear and respect. It's more dangerous because it can grow infinitely. Anyone can join. And anyone who refuses or betrays the faction can be destroyed. This suggests that Roman's new faction operates on completely different principles than the bloodline. The bloodline was about family legacy, about honoring Samoan heritage, about keeping power within the Anoa'i dynasty. There was a code. There were rules about respect and hierarchy. There was an expectation that family members would eventually reconcile because blood is thicker than water. But this new faction that Roman is building? There's no code except loyalty to Roman. There's no heritage except excellence and dominance. There's no reconciliation if you betray the group because Roman doesn't forgive disloyalty anymore. He eliminates it. Paul Heyman also dropped hints about who else might be part of this faction, and this is where wrestling fans are going absolutely crazy with speculation. Heyman mentioned that there are wrestlers currently on the Raw roster who are presenting themselves as allies to people like Seth Rollins, Cody Rhodes, and other babyfaces, but who are secretly reporting to Roman and waiting for the signal to strike. He specifically said there are people in that locker room who shake your hand and tell you they have your back, and then they call Roman and tell him everything you're planning. The paranoia that's about to grip Monday Night Raw when people realize they can't trust anyone is going to be beautiful to watch. So who could the moles be? Let's run through the most likely candidates based on recent behavior and storyline positioning. Dominic Mysterio is one name that keeps coming up in speculation. Dominic has been part of the Judgment Day faction, but there's been teasing of tension within that group. What if Dominic is actually working with Roman, and the Judgment Day drama is a cover? What if Roman promised Dominic that he would help him step out of his father's shadow and become a main event star in his own right if Dominic feeds Roman information about what's happening on Raw? Austin Theory is another name generating speculation. Theory has been floating without clear direction recently after his failed United States Championship pursuits and his dropped relationship with Mr. McMahon as a character element. Theory is young, ambitious, and talented. He's exactly the kind of wrestler Roman would want to recruit. And Theory has been inserting himself into situations involving top stars like he's gathering intelligence. What if every time Theory has confronted or interacted with someone like Seth Rollins or Cody Rhodes, he's been reporting those conversations back to Roman? Ludwig Kaiser is a wild card possibility that some fans are discussing. Kaiser recently split from Imperium and has been working as a singles competitor. He's talented but lacks a clear trajectory. He could be pretending to strike out on his own while actually serving as Roman's eyes and ears. Kaiser's European style and background would make him an unexpected member of Roman's faction, which is exactly why it would be such a shocking reveal. The most disturbing possibility that Paul Heyman hinted at is that Roman has recruited someone from Cody Rhodes' inner circle. Someone who Cody trusts completely. Someone who has been positioned as Cody's friend and ally. Heyman said, "What if I told you Roman has someone close to the American Nightmare? Someone who has been in Cody's ear, learning his strategies, understanding his relationships, and feeding all of that information back to the tribal chief." If that's true, if someone like Kevin Owens or Sami Zayn or even someone from Cody's personal life has been compromised by Roman, the betrayal would be absolutely devastating. Let's talk about what Seth Rollins is going through right now because his perspective on this betrayal is crucial to understanding the emotional weight of what's happening. Seth has positioned himself as the locker room leader, the veteran who looks out for younger talent and helps them navigate WWE's political landscape. Seth has been vocal about wanting to create a better environment in WWE than what he experienced coming up through the company. He's tried to be a mentor, an ally, a voice of reason and stability. And what did that get him? It got him targeted. It got him destroyed by two young wrestlers he probably tried to help at some point. It got him removed from television and his position of leadership undermined. According to sources close to Seth, he's not just dealing with physical injuries. He's dealing with a massive sense of betrayal and questioning whether his entire approach to being a locker room leader was naive and stupid. If young talent like Braun and Bronson would rather align with Roman Reigns than accept Seth's mentorship, what does that say about Seth's influence? What does that say about the next generation's values? Paul Heyman addressed this specifically when asked about Seth's reaction. Heyman said Seth Rollins represents the old way of thinking. Work hard, pay your dues, earn your spot through years of loyalty and excellence. But this generation doesn't want to wait. They don't want to earn, they want to take. And Roman Reigns is offering them a shortcut to everything Seth says they should work for. Roman is proving that power matters more than merit, that who you align with matters more than how many great matches you have, and that the wrestlers who understand this new reality will thrive while dinosaurs like Seth Rollins become extinct. That is brutal. Paul Heyman just called Seth Rollins a dinosaur. He suggested that Seth's entire philosophy about wrestling and success is outdated and irrelevant. And the scary part is, from a certain perspective, Heyman might be right. WWE has always been a political business where who you know and who supports you backstage matters as much or more than your in-ring ability. Roman Reigns is just being more honest and blatant about that reality than most. He's not pretending there's a meritocracy. He's openly building a power structure and inviting people to join or be destroyed. The wrestling media has been analyzing Paul Heyman's interview obsessively since it dropped, and the consensus seems to be that this is either the beginning of the most ambitious faction warfare storyline in WWE history, or it's going to be a disaster that collapses under its own weight. The optimistic take is that WWE is finally committing to long-term storytelling that builds slowly over months, that creates genuine paranoia and uncertainty about who can be trusted, and that culminates in an epic war between Roman's faction and a coalition of WWE's top stars who refuse to bend the knee. The pessimistic take is that WWE is promising something they can't deliver, that revealing moles and traitors will happen too quickly without proper build, that Roman's faction will become just another iteration of the Authority or the Corporation, and that within 6 months this will all be forgotten in favor of whatever the next short-term angle is. Wrestling fans have been burned before by ambitious faction storylines that started strong but petered out when WWE lost interest or when key performers got injured or when creative just couldn't figure out how to pay everything off satisfyingly. I'm personally somewhere in the middle. I think Paul Heyman's revelation is genuinely exciting and has the potential to reshape WWE's landscape in fascinating ways. The idea of Roman Reigns building a new faction that transcends family and heritage, that recruits based on talent and ambition regardless of background, that operates in the shadows until they're ready to reveal their full strength, that's compelling storytelling. The execution will determine whether this becomes iconic or forgettable. One of the most interesting aspects of this storyline is how it positions Paul Heyman himself. Heyman is Roman's wiseman, his advocate, his strategic advisor. But Heyman doing this interview, revealing Roman's plans, exposing the existence of the faction before Roman has officially returned or before all the recruits have been revealed, seems like it might be against Roman's strategic interests. Why would Heyman give away the element of surprise? Why would he put WWE's locker room on alert that there are traitors in their midst? Why would he make it harder for Roman's remaining undisclosed recruits to operate undercover? The answer, according to Heyman's own words in the interview, is psychological warfare. Heyman said Roman wants everyone to know. He wants Seth Rollins recovering from his injuries knowing it was a targeted attack ordered by Roman. He wants Cody Rhodes looking over his shoulder wondering which of his friends is actually Roman's spy. He wants every wrestler in WWE feeling paranoid, uncertain, and afraid. Because fear is how Roman will control Monday Night Raw without even being there. Fear of who might be next. Fear of who you can trust. Fear of what happens if you oppose the tribal chief when he finally decides to return. That's a different kind of villainy than we typically see in WWE. Usually, heel factions want to hide their numbers and plans to maintain the element of surprise. Roman's faction is apparently doing the opposite. They're announcing their presence, confirming that attacks on people like Seth Rollins were planned and sanctioned, and promising more chaos to come. They're daring WWE's babyfaces to figure out who the traitors are before those traitors strike. It's psychological torture as much as physical dominance. There's also a real-world business element to this storyline that's worth discussing. Roman Reigns has been WWE's top star for years. His championship reign was the longest of the modern era. He's main event multiple WrestleManias. He's transcended wrestling and appeared in mainstream media. But Roman's also been working an extremely demanding schedule for years, and there have been reports that he wants to scale back his wrestling appearances and move into a part-time role similar to what stars like John Cena and Brock Lesnar have done. This faction storyline could be WWE's way of keeping Roman relevant and central to their programming even if he's not wrestling every week. If Roman is positioned as the puppet master controlling multiple wrestlers from behind the scenes, he can have massive influence on storylines and be featured in segments without actually working matches regularly. Paul Heyman can be Roman's proxy on television, delivering promos and orders on Roman's behalf. And when Roman does appear for major shows or critical angles, those appearances become special events rather than routine occurrences. From WWE's perspective, this storyline also helps elevate multiple younger stars simultaneously. Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed are being positioned as main event level threats by association with Roman. Any other wrestlers who are revealed as part of the faction get instant credibility and importance. And even wrestlers who aren't part of the faction benefit from the storyline because the paranoia and uncertainty creates interesting character dynamics and gives everyone something meaningful to be involved in. Let me address the most common criticism I'm seeing from fans who hate this direction. They argue that making Roman the center of everything again, even when he's not actively on television, is exactly what drove many fans away from WWE during the peak of Roman's Super Roman push years ago. They're concerned that WWE learned nothing from that backlash and is just repeating the same mistake of building everything around Roman at the expense of other talent. They want to see fresh faces and new storylines that don't revolve around someone who's already had his time at the top. I understand that criticism, and it has validity. WWE does have a tendency to over-rely on certain stars and certain formulas because they know those things work financially even if segments of the fanbase complain. But I think there's a meaningful difference between Roman the conquering babyface who overcomes all odds and gets pushed despite fan rejection, and Roman the evil mastermind who corrupts young talent and builds an army from the shadows. One is a character fans rejected because it felt forced and inauthentic. The other is a legitimately compelling villain role that uses Roman's real-life dominance and status as fuel for the character. The key to making this work is ensuring that the eventual heroes who stand against Roman's faction are elevated to Roman's level rather than made to look inferior or dependent on Roman for relevance. When the war finally breaks out, when Roman's full faction is revealed and they go head-to-head with the coalition of WWE stars who refuse to join, the conflict needs to feel like a genuine battle between equals rather than Roman and his faction being portrayed as superior beings who eventually lose only because of numbers or interference. Paul Heyman was also asked in his interview about the bloodline and whether Solo Sikoa's version of the faction factors into Roman's new plans. Heyman's response was diplomatic but revealing. He said Solo Sikoa attempted to keep the bloodline alive in Roman's absence. He had mixed results. Roman has taken notice of both Solo's successes and his failures. Whether Solo has a place in Roman's future remains to be seen, but Roman is not sentimental about family anymore. If you can help him achieve his goals, you're valuable. If you can't, you're expendable. That applies to Solo just as much as anyone else. This suggests that we might eventually see a confrontation between Roman's new faction and Solo's bloodline, with the two groups competing for dominance on SmackDown and Raw respectively. That could lead to incredible matchups. Imagine Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed against Tama Tonga and Tonga Loa. Imagine Roman returning to confront Solo about who the real tribal chief is. Imagine the Usos caught between their loyalty to family and their complicated history with Roman's manipulation. There are so many potential directions for this storyline to explore. The timeline for when all of this comes to a head is still unclear. Roman Reigns has been off WWE television for months now, and there's no official word on when he's returning. WrestleMania season is approaching, and it would make sense for Roman to return sometime in the Royal Rumble to WrestleMania window when WWE's biggest storylines traditionally accelerate. Paul Heyman's interview might be the beginning of a slow build where more recruits are revealed over the coming weeks and months, where paranoia builds in the locker room, where attacks attributed to Roman's faction become more frequent, until finally Roman himself appears to take credit for everything and declare war on anyone who opposes him. Or this could move much faster than expected. WWE has become more willing in recent years to accelerate storylines when they feel they have momentum rather than dragging things out too long and losing audience interest. It's possible that Roman returns as soon as next week's Raw or SmackDown, that multiple faction members reveal themselves in rapid succession, and that we're in full-scale faction warfare by the end of the month. Paul Heyman's interview could be WWE testing audience reaction to the concept before committing fully to the direction. What's undeniable is that Paul Heyman revealing Roman Reigns as the mastermind behind Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed's betrayal of Seth Rollins has completely changed the conversation around WWE. Everyone is talking about this. Everyone is speculating about who else might be in the faction. Everyone is debating whether this is brilliant storytelling or a mistake. And that level of engagement, that level of passionate discussion and disagreement, is exactly what WWE wants. They've created something that matters, something that feels important, something that fans can't ignore.